WNST.net. A busy week around here if you're an Orioles fan and trying to fix them. They're in Chicago for the next several nights and then, of course, back home against the St. Louis Cardinals after a disastrous weekend of baseball at Yankee Stadium. This guy, I want to call him an Oriole fan. I'll let him speak for himself on this, but he is our longtime friend and contributor and the pride of West Baltimore and Mount St. Joe, now living in the Atlanta, Georgia area. He is the communications director for the Bahamas Bowl, as well as a longtime NFL employee at both the New Orleans Saints as well as the Atlanta Falcons. You probably know him from the famous 30 seconds he spent on the 30 for 30 on the Michael Jordan Birmingham Barons broadcast. We welcome our friend, Blog and Tackle on Twitter, and Chris Pica back on after you spent a week of baseball last week down in Atlanta, right? They're going to give you a cot at the new stadium down there, right?
Yeah, I got about 35 games down there this summer working for visiting team television when they come in, and so I spent 4 nights with the Phillies crew with CSN in Philadelphia, and then 3 days, 4 games, including a lovely day-night doubleheader with the Mets crew and Gary Cohen and Ron Darling and company, and really good folks, and not the greatest baseball in the National League.
I was going to say, dude, you saw some really, really bad baseball if you saw 7 days of that.
I've seen some individual performances that I like, but as teams, all 3 of those clubs, I mean, it's the Nationals and then everybody else in that division, but I've saw some pretty good performances, from a guy named Dansby Swanson, who's playing shortstop for the Braves, who just came up late last season, who I think is a tremendous talent. The Braves also have a center fielder who covers a ton of ground and has got a heck of an arm, Ender Inciarte. R.A. Dickey had a nice outing for them the other night, gave up 1 hit over 7 innings.
How old is he now? Is he like 42?
Yeah, he's 43.
43.
And he, and then it's possible I may have seen the last performance by Bartolo Colon. I mean, he pitched and was awful earlier in the week, and Friday night they gave out his bobblehead.
As long as he gets the bat. I don't care if he ever pitches again, as long as he gets to swing the bat.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, his bobblehead doesn't swivel side to side because he's allowed 11 home runs this year. So, and he's got like a 7+ ERA, so he would not be a candidate to try to help the Orioles out of this.
Oh, he's perfect for the Orioles, man. But here he wouldn't have to bat.
No.
It is fascinating, and like your Baltimore background, you went to Loyola, you're really a Baltimore guy, you still follow what goes on around here. This is a really interesting summer with the Orioles beginning this stumble, and the Machado thing, and the ownership thing, and the Buck and Dan Duquette struggles that Ken Rosenthal felt compelled to bring back up yet again this weekend. And this is the first time in our lifetime that it appears as though the Nationals are going to be very relevant this summer, and quite frankly, on some sort of autopilot. I mean, they're going to win this thing. They're going to win it going away. None of these teams can get to 500, let alone catch them. And you know that. And the Orioles are going to hit the rocks here. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, because this was Peter Angelos' darkest fear, is that the franchise in Washington would become more relevant than the franchise in Baltimore. And I think we're already starting to see that, Chris.
Well, yes, in the sense if you look at the records, yes. I look at the wild card standings right now. The Orioles are a half game out of the wild card. Cleveland isn't exactly setting the world on fire. Neither is Tampa Bay. Boston has been up and down. So it's going to be interesting, the decisions that have to be made at the major league level, because you've got to begin to figure out, can we be the wild card team and make the playoffs again? And right now, you look at the standings and you're going, okay, well, no one else is setting the house on fire outside of, a very surprising Minnesota team that's playing, decent ball right now. Houston's just been amazing this season. And of course, what the Yankees did this weekend and in the previous couple of weeks, starting to kind of turn on the Jets. But the rest of the American League, there's not a lot of there. And so if you get hot at the right time and you play the right combination of opponents, that's not to say the Orioles, with how they hit, couldn't put them back in line and keep themselves in a wild card chase which is going to make the decisions at the warehouse a heck of a lot harder when it comes down to the trade deadline.
Well, look, you've been in these organizations in the NFL level, and you know as well as I do that if Dan Duquette's drafting baseball players right now and talking about the future of the Orioles and the future of the Orioles when his contract's up in 16 months, and ditto to Buck Showalter, and ditto to Machado and to Zach Britton and Adam Jones, who are all, they have 1 year left. The question to me at this point for the Orioles isn't can we be the second wild card? It's can we win a World Series? And can we be the second wild card? Absolutely. Is that possible? Sure. Do the rest of these teams stink? By and large, and it looks like the Red Sox and the Yankees, much like they did for 15 years, are going to run off to some level, and one of them will be the wild card and one will win the division. It appears right now the Yankees have the upper hand, but it's June, man. I mean, it's early. But that being said, for the Orioles, the big picture problem here, as I see it, is the goof who owns the team, these guys who have been running the team as stewards, now getting toward the end. They haven't really had a parade. They've had a nice level of success. The old man meddled in the Chris Davis signing, which now appears to be one of the worst signings ever because, let's be honest, if Chris Davis hit the street tomorrow, who would give him 2 years and $10 million a year? Nobody, right? I mean, literally, he would be one of those dime a dozen guys that may be able to hit 40 home runs, but it's going to strike out 240 times on the way. And Machado, the really weird thing is I don't think they were prepared for the Britton injury, the falling apart of Tillman, combined with the falling apart of Gausman. But more than that, this Machado thing is curious to me. And how it's managed, and in any other organization, there would be, in any other big baseball town, people would really be down on Manny Machado right now. He lacked the loyalty to sign. Does he really want to be here? He's hitting 220. He starts fights with everybody else. And we're a year and a half out on losing a premier free agent at 25 years of age. And I don't know that this franchise, and I know you can speak to this from the NFL side, if there's not a real strategy, an overall strategy about what you're trying to do, and I don't know in this organization there can be a strategy beyond the next 16 months because the guys allegedly running the organization aren't here for the long haul yet.
Well, I think at least from the NFL experience, you're to put it in NFL terms, your head coach and your general manager have to be on the same page, in order to succeed. And you can't be in a position where one is necessarily stronger than the other, and you can't have someone who's desperate to try to win right now as opposed to trying to build something that's a lot long-term. And I think the Ravens, as we well know, have been very successful at long-term planning and keeping everybody on the same page. But I was on franchises in New Orleans, for instance, where the head coach wanted to make moves that probably weren't in the best interest long run for the franchise in terms of the players they would be picking up because he was staring at the last year of his contract and he wanted to stay and wanted to win right now. And the general manager is in the room telling him, that's not a good signing. This is not what we need to do, and we need to worry about the long haul here. And so sometimes the owner has to be sort of the deciding factor between the two. I don't necessarily see Buck Showalter and Dan Duquette in a room doing that because Buck Showalter's never, ever struck me as someone who, as much as he wants to win, he's been on the organizational side enough to know that you've got to make moves for the long run. And they've quite honestly, they've pieced this together the last few seasons. They run the Norfolk shuttle. They know how many options guys have left. They've been very fortunate with the type of players they've been able to pick up with free agency, which are Buck Showalter-type players. Play hard, come to play every day. You don't have to be the most talented player in the world, but, you look at, the Trey Mancinis, Mark Reynolds, different players like that, role players have come through, Sun Yoon Kim. All these guys who everybody looked at and kind of cocked their head a little bit, these guys have all made contributions because they come to the park every day and they're hungry to play.
Well, that's how Ryan Flaherty wound up on the team and Steve Pierce. I mean, there's no doubt Buck had his guys. The problem now is who's going to pitch. And
well, that's been the problem all along. That's been the issue for the last 3 years is that there's been no depth in the pitching rotation. you get an injury like what happened to Zach Britton, and suddenly now you're really piecing it together out of the bullpen. And add to the fact that you've got a bunch of starters who are not able to get past 5 innings, and I saw it in Atlanta all last week. You watched a bunch of Braves starters couldn't get through 5, and they're running a 7-man bullpen out there, and you're praying to God that you can piece this together for 4 innings to win a baseball game. And there are some nights you can do it and get on a little bit of a roll, but there are also a lot of nights where it goes away. And it happened to Philadelphia in a 14-1 game, a few nights back. So
we're familiar with that. I watched the Orioles play all weekend. I mean,
right.
Once it starts to get away and you start bringing in the Crichtons and you start bringing in the Blyers and, you're grasping at that point, just somehow trying to get the third out in the 5th inning when you're losing 14-3.
Right.
It's disheartening, but more than that, I think it's illuminating because Tillman and Gausman don't look like they're going to make it to August. I mean, I don't mean to be mean. I mean, in the same way that you're like, how long can you go with Ubaldo Jimenez with a 7 ERA? I mean, there are no signs of life with Gausman and Tillman right now, and there's no cavalry beyond Alec Asher for whatever he is at this point. I mean, they tried Edwin Jackson over the weekend, Chris. I mean, they've already scraped the bottom of the barrel, and it's not even the middle of June yet.
And they've put a ton of pressure on that bullpen, and those guys, and you now run into a situation here in June where you've asked those guys to throw a lot of innings already. And you can't do that night after night after night. It will come back to bite you for a stretch, especially if you don't have that depth at AAA, at AA, guys that can come up and do a spot start. I mean, you've got to have starters that can get you into the 6th, into the 7th. But when you're seeing pitch counts 75 through 3 1/3, and the guy's going to get to 100 pitches before he gets out of the 5th, you're going to ask your bullpen to throw 4 innings again. I mean, it's just that's been the issue. When this team has had everything going right, it's because the pitching's held together by duct tape in some cases, but it's held together and given them some playoff runs. When it hasn't held together and you've got the stretch there at the moment here with 9-20 here in the last 29 games after getting off to such a great start, they've just sort of regressed back to where they were, which is now they're barely just a little bit over 500 because the pitching's gone south. And I don't know if they can go get a piece before the trade deadline that will help them. But they're going to have to sit in a room and say, okay, we're 18 months from Manny Machado. If he goes into his free agent year, we probably don't get anything for him. What do we do? Is this trade time to get something and get a lot of pieces right now? Do we pull the trigger on it?
He is Chris Pica. He is Blog and Tackle out on Twitter, our defending champion and longtime friend here talking some Orioles baseball. We're going to get into the PFWA awards, Pro Football Writers, as well as talk a little bit about Frank DeFore. But I want to stay on the Orioles, and you brought Machado up. And this is where I go backwards with Angelos and the goofy sort of structure of the ownership and who's really making the decisions here. Because in any other organization, anywhere else, not only would Machado be having the fans come down on him and the media coming down on him and all that sort of thing, it would also be time in any normal organization, like the Chicago White Sox are going to see in the offseason, said about Chris Sale. Well, we're not going to give him $140 million at the end of this. Let's go turn him into some prospects. And I don't know that I trust Dan Duquette to make these deals or Peter Angelos to be involved in this, but I do know this. In any other place, that would be being talked about. I don't know that it's talked about here, Chris. I don't believe they're going to deal Manny Machado. I'm not saying they should or shouldn't. I'm saying, what's the big plan here? Because I don't think they're winning the World Series this year, Chris. I mean, you could talk about the second wild card, and you could talk about them getting to 84 wins or 85 or whatever that scenario would be, that Tillman will get right and that we'll get O'Day back and Britton will come back and Machado will straighten out and Davis will start walking more and hitting more home runs and making contact and it'll be all peachy. You can say all of that, but I don't believe it. I'm not buying that based on what I've seen and based on my experience with this. And I don't know that being the second wild card should be the goal of the organization right now. Winning the World Series needs to be what they're thinking about, not doing a one-and-done facer against the Red Sox on October 4th. And I know you would say, well, if you get into the tournament, you have a chance to win the tournament. And not the way they've pitched lately. And I wonder what the big plan is. What is the big plan on Machado? What is the big plan on Buck? What is the big plan for the team? Because clearly the big plan's not, well, we have pitchers in Delmarva that we're waiting on. I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all.
I think in my own, the way I feel about it is I think Showalter should be around for the long haul, and I hope he is, because I think, he's one of the top three managers this club has ever had behind Earl Weaver and Paul Richards. As far as impact on the organization, I think he's as smart a baseball manager he was when he first started. I think he manages the team as best he can. Like I said, he's done some things that have helped this franchise on the field and off. He's an integral part of them continuing to stay relevant. The Duquette situation is a completely different deal. I think Buck could probably work with anybody in that role. I'm sure he'd like it to be Duquette, but again, who knows at this point. And as for
maybe Buck wants that role. I mean, that's the word. The word is maybe Buck will do this year, maybe next year. But if you're going to extend Buck, extend him as an executive, and then what does that mean for Duquette? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what point they run Duquette off. Angelos has not run off management people. As a matter of fact, he wouldn't let Duquette leave 2 years ago, which, may be part at the root of this story as to how bizarre that is.
And there's I don't think there's any doubt based on the stories that we've seen, and it goes back a long time. There's always been a bit of front office dysfunction there, but it felt like there was stability with Duquette and Showalter here over the last few years.
Well, there has been. I'm just wondering for the future. My point is the reason they've done well has been because there's been some stability and some sort of vision and some sort of tide of young players, whether it's Machado and Britton. And I, even go back when we believed in Arrieta. I mean, Tillman's all part of that. Adam Jones in the trade. All of that came before. A lot of that came before Duquette and Showalter walked into here. They took advantage of that, and Machado being the kind of player he's been, and Markakis being a good player. I mean, Wieters was a major league player. They had all of that going on. Now we're at the end. Now what do you do? What do you do when you hit the rocks? Your $400 million alleged players hitting 220. Your pitching stinks. Your minor league pitching stinks. Your minor league organization stinks. And you have a lot of money. And, oh, by the way, the Yankees and the Red Sox are starting to look like the Yankees and the Red Sox. So if you want to win moving forward over the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to have to play at a different level than even you played at 2 or 3 years ago, because the competition's going to be different now.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes the decisions they're going to have here in the next few months, which they faced in terms of Trumbo and Davis, but these were players who might get a contract deal from somebody, but they weren't highly prized outside of the organization. They were organization guys, people that that the organization likes. They're good people. They play hard. They play the right way. But these aren't guys where clubs are going to line up to get them. They haven't had that kind of decision to make. They've had to make decisions on re-signing players at the number that they want to re-sign them at.
Well, Gonzalez and Chen were such a huge part of this, right? I mean, through the winning, and Gonzalez, they kicked out the side door, and Wei and Chen, they said, go ahead, we'll go sign Giovanni Gallardo instead. And I'm not saying signing Chen was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, but you at least have to replace him with someone that's going to produce like that, and we haven't seen that over the last 2 seasons. I mean, we missed the days of a healthy Chris Tillman. We missed the days of Wei and Chen and Gonzalez taking the ball every 5th day and not looking like Wade Miley or whatever this shadow of Tillman is and whatever. I mean, Gausman's a mess. I mean, when you have Gausman a mess and Machado a mess and Britton on the DL, I don't know how you're going to get to September.
And I think the Britton injury really hamstrung this team. I mean, that forced them to basically refigure the bullpen. If Britton's the closer here over the last month, I'm not saying it's 9-20 because the starters have not been great, but there's probably 2 or 3 games in there they probably could have closed out late with the right bullpen combinations. They didn't close out because Brad Brock was in that position and other people had to fill in.
Well, take the Saturday night when they had to bring Jimenez in, week and a half ago, right?
Right.
I mean, yeah.
So you're right. That's what I'm saying. There's probably 2 or 3 games in there that could have gone the other way, where the lead against the Yankees and the wild card race is a little bit different looking than it is right now. And that injury is really, really big. But this is the first time they've got to look at a player under contract who's going to be wanted by a lot of clubs, and they're going to get a lot of calls. This is going to be the first time in a few years that there are going to be calls coming into the office. Are they going to take them? Are they going to seriously discuss them? And what will it take to extract Manny Machado from Baltimore 18 months early? I'm not against doing that if you get the right package of players in return, and that means you need to get starters that can play right now, and you need to get some minor league depth. If that means it's a 5-player deal or however you want to structure it, I don't think Bundy's on the table. I think he's fine, but I think Machado and another player for a starter and some prospects, especially on the pitching side, I might be inclined to take that deal right now if the right combination was offered.
Well, especially if you're not going to sign him. I mean, lose him now, lose him later. I mean, I'm releasing the Peter principles, as you know, Chris, all summer long. And, I go back to that period of time around Mike Messina and what transpired there. The one thing that, Messina had some injuries and got the line drive, and he wasn't very good, quite frankly, in his walk year. In the case of Machado, I don't think anyone was prepared for Machado to be hitting 220 in the middle of June and looking kind of sickly the way he is. I don't think anybody was prepared for Kevin Gausman to look like this at this point. So, a lot of things have gone wrong, and then they pulled these wins out of their rectum last week against the Pirates. As you and I know, where was that in 1979? But, they've also won some miraculous games. Chris Pica joining us here. He's the communications director for the Bahamas Bowl. He's our longtime friend and Baltimorean. He's been hanging out down in Atlanta for a number of years after working for the Atlanta Falcons and the New Orleans Saints. You can follow him at Blog and Tackle. I want to tackle one little topic that I haven't tackled at all, and I run my best of when I'm sick or I bite my tongue off or crazy things happen or I go on vacation. And Frank DeFord has been kind enough to do my show, over the years a dozen times. I probably have 5 or 6 of those conversations that I will probably break out next month when my wife and I are celebrating our anniversary. Frank DeFord was a sports writer, but he also had all of his roots in Baltimore. And, we've lost John Stedman, and I know guys like you and I, when we met at the News American in 1984, looked up to these kinds of people. And to lose a Frank DeFord and to not talk about it or not let a Baltimore writer like yourself talk about it, I would be remiss, Chris.
Well, Frank DeFord was a Baltimorean, and obviously, I think a lot of people knew about him from his time at Sports Illustrated. Others who listen to NPR heard his commentaries once a week. He always so incredibly well spoken. He wasn't just a sports writer; he was just a writer, and he took things that we saw for granted on the playing field and took the story behind those players and made that into a better story than just the runs, hits, and errors. And I think, he wrote some great personality pieces too that I remember that. He wrote an appreciation of Chuck Thompson that ran on NPR when Chuck passed away. And then his story on Johnny Unitas, the best that ever was, that ran in SI after he passed back in '01, was a tremendous piece of writing by someone who saw him play and someone who got to know him. And, he was always impeccably dressed. When he walked in a room, he lit up the room. People noticed him right away. He was one of the great sports writers of the golden era, really, of the 1970s, before television and cable and the internet. We read the paper. We actually read Sports Illustrated cover to cover and read the stories. And, he started a national newspaper, a sports newspaper called The National, and brought in some incredible talent to do it. And they burned through a lot of money because the person bankrolling them gave them a pretty large check. And they went in and these, if you look back at the bylines of the people that worked for Frank that he put together, and he had never been an editor-in-chief, and it was a tremendous, experiment. It didn't work out. But you think about some of the websites now with some of the talent that they have. It's not necessarily on the same plane of writers that he had, but it was the same sort of idea. Let's get the best of the best to tell you what's going on in the games and what's going on behind the scenes. And his pieces on HBO and Real Sports for many years were tremendous. Just a great communicator and a great observer of life. Where sports is fun and games, but he really brought what was behind the scenes and kind of pulled back the curtain to let you see what was going on, and he wasn't afraid to take on organizations and people along the way that especially the International Olympic Committee and others that maybe don't play by the rules very well in business, and he wasn't afraid to say something about it, and it's a loss for sports, but it's also a loss for people who like to read good writing, and that's and I think that's the shame of losing him too.
He wasn't a sports writer; he was a writer who wrote about sports, right?
Yep, I think that's a very fair assessment.
He is Chris Pica. He is Blog and Tackle out on Twitter, and this week managing all facets of the Pro Football Writers Association. You're also their communications guy, along with the Bahamas Bowl. Tell me about the Pro Football Writers Awards this week. I know you'll be tweeting about this all week long.
Well, we do what is called the Off-Field Awards, which is basically in January the PFWA votes on the all NFL teams, the all conference teams, the MVP, Rookie of the Year. Basically, everything happens on the field that you see during the season. And then this time of year, we do 6 different awards that our writers vote on. Everything from the George House Award, which is given to an NFL player, coach, or staff member who overcomes the most adversity to succeed. Dennis Pitta of the Ravens is one of the nominees for that award. We do a Good Guy Award, which is an NFL player for his qualities and style in helping pro football writers do their job. The Dick McCann Award, which is, as people say, which really isn't true. There isn't really a writer's wing to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but there is a plaque with the winners of this award in the Hall of Fame, and some great names in there. Adam Schefter, Ed Werder, Ron Borges among the 5 nominees. We do the Jack Horgan Award. Joe Horgan from the Pro Football Hall of Fame. His father, who was a longtime PR guy for the Buffalo Bills and the American Football League. We give an award in Jack's name to the league called official for helping writers do their job, and people like Dean Blandino, Mike Mayock, Brian McCarthy from the NFL PR office, Rick Spielman, the Vikings GM, are all nominated this year there. And then we've got 2 more. The Pete Rozelle Award, which is for the NFL club PR staff that basically is excellent working with the media. The Ravens are one of the nominees for that award, along with Cincinnati, Houston, Miami, and Tampa Bay. And then the following Monday, June 19th, we do Dr. Z, who you remember from Sports Illustrated, who suffered a stroke a few years ago and can't communicate now, unfortunately. But he was big on assistant coaches. And so we have the class of 2017, which is Lifetime Achievement Assistant Coach in the NFL, and some great names in that group. Bud Carson, Gunther Cunningham, Bruce DeHaven, Jim Hannafin, and Bob McKittrick are the nominees for that award, and we'll announce that via Peter King on June 19th. So, this is a lot of things that kind of Lifetime Achievement Awards, but also some things that let people know, hey, these are the guys that help the writers do their job, and some people who are courageous in dealing with some of the physical things that happen, in order to play the game of football. So I think it's a great week for the organization, and I'm proud to help publicize the nominees and the winners.
He is Chris Pica. He is Blog and Tackle out on Twitter and a longtime Baltimore aficionado talking a little Orioles baseball. You can follow him. He's down in Atlanta, GA. When you back at the Atlanta Stadium, and do you like the new Atlanta Stadium, Chris?
I like the new Atlanta Stadium. I'll be in there on Father's Day, working actually the home side on the Brave side against the Marlins, doing the bug for them. It's a very nice ballpark. I'll equate it a lot to what Minnesota has at Target Field. There's not a bad seat in the house. I walked up to the top of the upper deck. The upper deck in the stadium is only 12 rows.
Wow.
So it's not like you got a long hike up to the top of the stadium. Every seat in there is great. Unlike the old stadium, the Turner Field, unless you're driving a car, you can't take MARTA out to that stadium. You can get close to take shuttles and things like that, but basically this is a stadium you drive to, and they built an entertainment district that's also going to include an Omni Hotel that's being built right now called the Battery. and this has got great restaurants along there. They're open year-round, but basically it's an entertainment place for adults and kids prior to the game. So
much like
there's a
what
lot
was
of
built
businesses.
around the New England Stadium, right? I mean, that was kind of a model.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Anything Green Bay's doing, yes, it's along the same lines, and the Braves have control of it. So there's going to be, you've got a lot of businesses out there already. They're building, apartments and condos nearby. So this is sort of a live, work, and play area that has all that. But the Braves, built something. It's nice. It's out in the suburbs. Some of the Mets people I worked with here last week said, they like Turner Field, but they've gotten tired. They like this situation because you just have so much that you can get to inside the stadium and talk about. I mean, you can rent a glove from Mizuno during the game and sit out there, if you want to catch foul balls
Really?
or, batting practice, and then you got a chance to buy the glove at the end of the game or return the glove at the end of the game. So they do a learner program. They've got things for kids to do that you pay for. It goes towards Braves charities, and you've got all the different party areas there that they had at Turner Field in some respects, the Chop House and things like that. So it's geared towards fans of all ages, all types. The best thing about the stadium, in my view, and there's nothing wrong with Camden Yards, but if you're in the concourse areas, for instance, you've got a 360-degree view of the field on every level. So if you're in line and you want to turn around and see what's going on in the game, it's easy to do that.
That was the one thing that Camden Yards sort of quote unquote got wrong, right? Like that other stadiums have improved upon. People that go to Philadelphia talk about that all the time, that you can still see the field while you're getting a beer. That's something you couldn't do at Camden Yards.
Yep, and so that also plays in effect because you're on an area that's, the road leading into the stadium on one side of it is Windy Ridge, and there's a reason why they call it that. So you've got this sort of breeze that can come through the stadium because of the openings, the way it's built, and we're seeing a lot more home runs hit at the new ballpark at SunTrust Park than we did at Turner the last few years. Unfortunately, for those who follow former Orioles, Nick Markakis, who's actually hitting the ball fairly decently. He's only got one home run and about 20-plus runs batted in. Jim Johnson struggling in the bullpen and Eric O'Flaherty, so you can't get the ball up in that ballpark, and it'll be interesting to see once you get in the 90-degree weather in July and August how far the ball is going to fly out of there. They certainly want to build a little bit more of a hitter's ballpark. John Sherholtz, former, was a Baltimorean, is an executive at the Braves still and was very involved in the building of the stadium and how they did the field there. But if you're interested in seeing the new wave of major league ballparks, I think that SunTrust Park is tremendous. It's just sort of out in the suburbs. This is, like I said, like I've told people before, this would be like building a brand new Orioles stadium at where 695 and Interstate 70 cross.
Well, Billy Joel's already played there, so it's already been christened. They're not going to play any meaningful baseball there anytime soon. So
Metallica's there later this summer. I mean, they're going to do concerts to the stadium. So I mean, it's going to be a nice area once everything is built up and done, which they're still working on. It's going to be another year before all of it's in place. It's your typical live, work, play area that owners want to put major league ballparks in now because that's a year-round revenue stream as opposed to a ballpark like Turner Field that was surrounded by very little. And by the way, that area is being redone. If you visited Atlanta, you've been to Turner. That stadium is now the property of Georgia State University. They are retrofitting that stadium to be their football facility. So they'll move out of the Georgia Dome. They'll play in Turner Field this year in football going forward. And the parking lot, which used to hold Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, they're going to put a college baseball stadium in there, about a 3,000-seater. But the bigger thing is for that area, they're going to have dorms, retail, and housing. So that area is going to be built up because Georgia State's campus literally comes up to where the parking lot starts all the way at the top. If you look down from Turner Field, that large parking lot, I'm sure you were in a couple of times.
Well, I know where the fake wall is from the old Atlanta Fulton County wall from where Hank Aaron hit the home run.
There.
Yeah.
Right. So that entire area is going to be owned by Georgia State developers, and that's going to be made into sort of this new area that has all of these things. And Turner Field will still exist. It's going to be a football stadium starting September for Georgia State and the Sun Belt.
Good thing that Lefty put Georgia State on the map, right?
No doubt about that.
Absolutely, man. I get up with Leo Mazzoni every once in a while. We were talking about balls flying out of that new ballpark down there. And one thing for sure, the old facilities come a long way from Muhammad Ali and the torch, right? It's only been 21 years.
Yeah, and it's amazing that Atlanta is replacing both stadiums, the Georgia Dome, who lasted a little bit longer, and Turner Field. They've turned those facilities over in less than 25 years. And, you look at Camden Yards, its 25th anniversary, and that ballpark's really built to be there, 60, 70, 80 years if the upkeep is done well. The upkeep on Turner Field, quite honestly, wasn't done the last couple of years with the Braves knowing they were moving out. They didn't leave. There's a lot of things that Georgia State's probably got to fix. But Camden Yards is still kept up very well and needs to be if you're going to have that stadium last 50 or 60 years. But someday Baltimore's going to have that discussion again about, do you build the new stadium, or is it, you have to spend so much money every year to keep that facility up to date, with wiring, piping, everything else. People don't realize how much of an expense that is for cities. There's the initial cost of building the stadium, and then there's the upkeep, that certainly the teams will want the city to pay here in Atlanta.
Anyone that's ever bought a house knows that when their washer and their dryer goes up, right? Exactly.
Right, and just think of something that's a lot larger than that with a lot more moving parts. So,
what do you mean I need a new stove and a new refrigerator? I just bought that 15 years ago.
Hot water heaters, yes, we know. And it's so between 25 years, two stadiums have been replaced in the same city. You've got the Mercedes-Benz Dome that's going to be finished here shortly for the Falcons, right next to the Georgia Dome. The Georgia Dome is going to be imploded in November. But the shelf life, a lot of these facilities now, unless you do it right, is a lot shorter than 50+ years from Memorial Stadium or some of the others. You have to do the upkeep in order to keep them top notch.
He is Chris Pica. He is Blog and Tackle. You want to keep a follow for him all week on the Pro Football Writers Awards, as well as all things in the world of sports. Chris, always great to catch up with you, buddy.
Thank you, Nestor. I appreciate it as always.
The pride of the Mount St. Joe Gales, as well as the Loyola Greyhounds. Chris Pica can be followed at Blog and Tackle. You can find me out in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. You can also download the TuneIn Radio app where we come in crystal clear. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.